The trip in system to the third planet of the Sol system would normally take a day at most. The extended warranty took a week, advancing slowly while constantly broadcasting their identity and intentions. From the Ricard testimony, they knew General Stan Ford had planned to return to Sol and salvage what could be salvaged. They didn't know what would be waiting in the system, potentially the entire remaining UTC fleet on automatic controlled by an AI. So far, they'd only found dust and echoes, multiple fleet graveyards, more Gartin Morlov ships, in each they had invaded the Terra Nova system. They stopped at one when Gaia found a Morlov ship not seen in the Terra Nova campaign, but later identified from the Makar testimony as a High Prince's flagship. She took detailed scans of it, just in case. Though several decades had passed between the fall of Terra Nova and the attack on Sol, none of the ships showed any improvements. Not surprising. With the death of the Hivemind, the warriors and drones had no creativity, no drive to do better, make something new. Approaching lunar perimeter, Gaia announced. General McComb nodded. Make sure the transceiver disconnect is primed. As undermanned as they were, only with Gaia's aid were they fully able to fly the ship, a feat only possible by connecting Gaia to the ship's main computer, and with that came connection to the main transceiver array. If another AI attempted to infiltrate the ship, they would have to disconnect the transceiver, which meant if it came to a fight they would have to flee. There were 4 disconnects. Gaia controlled an automated disconnect. There was a second physical disconnect on the bridge, a third in the Combat Information Center that was not currently manned, and a 4th and final disconnect in main engineering. Gaia's holoform appeared next to his chair on the bridge and nodded. Done. Secondary transceiver array is physically disconnected from all ship functions, save for backup bridge holo emitters. Primary transceiver array is firewalled as best I can. McComb nodded as they breached the lunar perimeter and got their first look at Earth that was not from a long-range telescope. The scars on the surface they seen from afar were more obvious. Before he could study the display, it shifted, as Guy rippled. Contact. Silhouettes match UTC warships. No detectable emissions or power signatures. Location, Lagrange, 5. Radar and LIDAR returns still unmerging. Count is currently 30 plus ships, including 2 Ragnarok-class supercarriers. All stop. Bow down 5 degrees. Get up bow guns off target. All defense to maximum readiness. Type beam contact the carriers. McComb ordered. Sarah DeCane's voice came from the engineering channel. Reactor spinning to max. Power ready for all defensive measures. Bow down, all stop. I don't like flying these big bastards, but this girl handles like a dream. Roscoe James replied from navigation. Defensive field plot unlocked. Corporal Mix replied from the tactical station. 5 hours later, they had not moved, nor had they received any response from the fleet, now up to 62 ships, the 2 supercarriers, 20 Mjolnirs, and 40 tier-class destroyers. Gaia, what do we know? General McComb asked. Everyone was now on the bridge over the ops console, at the aft of the captain's chair. I've been able to visually identify the Ragnarok carriers as the Odin and Freya. All ships show signs of a controlled reactor shutdown, only the Odin shows signs of atmosphere. All other ships, passive grav echo, show vacuum in all departments. According to the Malkar testimony, the Odin was General Stanford's flagship. Nothing else? General McComb asked. No, General. I do not believe there are any powered-on systems in the fleet. Corporal Mick spoke up. I could take a couple of APUs over and see if we can get the comms and main computer back up. Gaia rippled. I would suggest if such a course of action is taken, only Corporal Mix enter the Odin. If any automated systems remain, they would recognize the surface implants. McComb frowned. Any other dangers? Gaia shrugged. Impossible to say, General. I detect none, but there were several decades of advancement prior to the end. The stealth coatings on the ships are far more advanced than what I use on the extended warranty. McComb looked over at Roscoe. Jones, can you get him there and back? Do not smoke pot and hate religion, Roscoe replied. McComb looked at Sarah, Mix, and Gaia in return, who he shrugged in turn. Mission approved, Corporal. I've never seen a Ragnarok before, Jones said as they were on approach. Mix nodded as he checked his suit. I served at one, once, the Frigga, he replied, then nodded to Sarah to double-check his suit. It's about as bulky as a pre-space wetsuit with a camel pack on the back, but it was Marine Corps issue. It could take a ballistic hit from a 12.7mm projectile moving at hypersonic speeds. His organs would probably rupture, but the suit would be intact. Crew called her the blonde bitch because of the Nordic woman on the ship's crest, and she was a cantankerous ship. Never let anyone down in combat, but during a regular cruise, constant problems. Red alert went out and poof, problems disappeared. He distracted himself. Good to go, Mickey, she replied over comms. They had both already checked the auxiliary power units. She held his arm a moment before moving into the cockpit with Roscoe and sealing the hatch. Mix took a deep breath and popped the hatch on the Selfnir. They were already on the dorsal recovery deck of the Odin. Unlike pre-space carriers, the outer decks were not used for launch of aerospace fighters, but for recovery of them. A Mjolnir like the extended warranty could land on the deck, and recovery ops could continue, albeit hampered slightly, but neither ship could jump to FTL while they were touching. A supercarrier like the Odin had 4 recovery decks: port, starboard, dorsal, and ventral. They all resembled a pre-space American supercarrier, only many times bigger. The aft was full of engines, and the bow was stuffed with kinetic kill guns, plasma guns, missile racks, and torpedo tubes. Roscoe put them down a few hundred meters from the aerospace control tower for the dorsal recovery deck. He engaged his mag boots and lifted the 2 APUs and began to move across the deck towards the airlock at the base of the ACT. It didn't take long to reach it. Mr. Warranty, I'm at the hatch. Your signal show the airlock is empty and the hatch is not locked. Copy, Mix. Proceed. Jeromy Carmickle's voice came. He nodded to himself and grasped the wheel and spun it. He could feel the thunk of the locks retracting through his gloves. Then the hatch swung open silently in the void. He moved through and closed it behind him, his helmet's lights lighting up the airlock. It was big enough an entire squad could enter. He set the first APU down next to a bulkhead-mounted comm panel. It took a few moments to open the panel, but soon enough he had the APU connected to it, powering internal comms. Comm test, is my signal using the Odin's internal comm repeater? Gaia responded shortly. Affirmative, Corporal. We should be able to keep communication with you as you go inside now. He nodded to himself as he moved to the internal airlock door and consulted the gauges there. I'm showing 1 standard atmosphere on the other side. The lock is unpowered, manually priming. He replied as he opened the emergency override and began to manually pump air into the airlock. Before long, the mechanism detected enough atmosphere on the other side that the mixing valves opened. With a rushing hiss, the airlock equalized. Safety locks fell, and he spun the handle. The internal door opened. I'm in. This is kind of creepy, guys. I want you all to know that. Roger that, Mickey, Sarah's voice came. Abandoned unpowered ghost ship in the dead solar system orbiting our abandoned crater world is creepy. He laughed as he moved for the ship. This is going to take a while without the trams. A little bit ended up being 2 hours. He had oxygen for 72 hours, then he could crack his helmet. Readings said the atmosphere was good, but he had no desire to test it. But he'd made it. The Odin's Bridge. Or rather the security foyer, outside the bridge. The foyer itself was a massive airlock, as the bridge was a survival shelter. It also had a larger armory and equally large inventory of rescue gear. Mick sealed the foyer behind him and moved to aft to the bridge hatch. I show no admiral on the bridge and no power to the airlock. I'm going to use a rescue lock rather than pump out the whole foyer. Good idea, Sarah replied. Mick shook his head as he found the rescue locks on the wall. They were all intact, and took one of the portable plastic airlocks and snapped it against the bridge hatch, spread it out, then popped the epoxy pods on all the surfaces. They mixed and made a seal in seconds. A cleaning catalyst could be used to melt the epoxy and clean it up, but he wouldn't be needing it as he stepped inside the lock, big enough for 3 people, sealed it behind him, and began to manually vent the area with the override controls next to the bridge hatch. It took him far longer to pump out the airlock than to enter the ship, but this time he had to manually move all the air, not just change enough pressure that the atmo valves would open. After another half hour, the hatch's safety locks disengaged and he spun the handle, stepping onto the Odin's Bridge. It looked almost identical to the extended warranties, only bigger. He looked at the captain's chair. Holy shit! He jumped. A vacuum mummified corpse was strapped to the chair. His suit's HUD interrogated the corpse's ancient neuro implants and ID'd the body as General Stan Ford. Cause of death, heart failure, before the implants failed. Mix took a deep breath. All clear. General McComb came on the line. What happened? Jump scare, sir. Is under control. Mix replied, moving next to the body. His dog tags were floating above him, gently. Mix took the second tag and added it to his pouch, then offered a silent prayer for the man. Then he moved over to the communication console. Any bridge control would work for their purposes, but the comms console would be able to draw extra power from the first APU, along with allowing Gaia access. It took him 10 minutes to open up the console, but connecting the APU took seconds. Once the unit powered on, the console lit up. "Gaia, are you in?" he asked. "I am. Logs downloading. You may return to the ship." "You don't have to tell me twice," he replied, pausing once more to honour the fallen general. He saw the hatch behind him and re-entered the security foyer. Exiting was as simple as unzipping the plastic rescue lock, then retracing his steps. 2 hours later, he was back in the ATC's airlock. He took a second cable from the APU and connected it to the airlock to purge the atmosphere, then made his way back across the deck to the Selfnir. The Selfnir made a short trip back to the Warutteri with him still in his suit, a quick trip to decon, and he reported to the bridge. "General McComb?" "What is it, Corporal?" Mix held up the tag. "General Stanford was on the bridge, sir." General McComb nodded his head and bowed it for a moment as he took the tag. "He was a hero. Entered the Morlov." "His watch is done, sir." McComb nodded. "His watch is done."